السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. موارد تربوية وأنشطة محدثة ومخصصة لتشجيع الناس ولا سيما الشباب على تحدي العنصرية بكافة أشكالها، وذلك عبر النشاطات الرياضية المتنوعة، وعلى رأسها كرة القدم التي تجمع مختلف الأطياف من داخل المؤسسة الخيرية أظهر البطاقة الحمراء للعنصرية في غلاسكو اسكتلندا. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. لعل أكثر من نصف أولئك الذين تعرضوا لحوادث التمييز العنصري في اسكتلندا لم يبلغوا عن ذلك بحسب دراسة أخيرة. الباحثون في جامعة ستراثكلايد وجدوا أن ثلث الأقليات الاسكتلندية من أصول أفريقية خبروا تمييزاً في ال5 سنوات الماضية. هذه الدراسة هي الأولى التي ركزت على تجارب الأقليات الإثنية في اسكتلندا. 500 شخص جرى استصراح آرائهم وقالوا إن التمييز لم يكن في منطقة دون سواها، ولكن كانوا يواجهون ذلك عموماً في الحصول على وظيفة أو ترقية أو في الحقل التربوي وحتى في وسائل النقل العام. أكثر من 82% من الذين تعرضوا لتمييز عزوا السبب لعرقهم، أما 42% فقالوا إنه بسبب دينهم. ويبدو جلياً أن قضية التمييز العنصري هي مسألة تقض مضجع الأقليات من أصول أفريقية وعرقية ليس فقط في اسكتلندا ولكن على صعيد المملكة المتحدة كلها. لذلك علاج هذه المشكلة ينبغي أن يكون محور اهتمام صناع السياسة بحسب محللي الدراسة. ناطق باسم الحكومة الاسكتلندية صرح بأنهم سيرصدون ما يقارب 5 ملايين دولار لمنظمات تروج للمساواة بين الأديان والأعراق ولتطوير إطار مساواة عرقية حديث لمعالجة العنصرية وتعزيز المساواة. نيكولا هاي مديرة حملة إرفعوا البطاقة الحمراء بوجه العنصرية في غلاسكو وجيلين يونسون المسؤولة التربوية فيها تحدثاننا من الداخل عن ظروف تأسيس وانطلاق هذه المؤسسة وأهدافها، ولماذا باتت مسألة العنصرية تتفاقم الآن أكثر من أي وقت مضى، وكيف يضعون الخطط التربوية الناجعة للتوصل إلى تقليص العنصرية لا سيما في المدارس، وما الأساليب المتبعة لهذا الهدف، ولماذا يركزون على كرة القدم أكثر من أي رياضة أخرى في هذا السياق. Nicola Hay, campaign manager for Show Racism, the Red Card in Glasgow. Welcome to الداخل from the inside, ma'am.
Thank you for having me here.
You're always welcome, ma'am. Well, Show Racism, the Red Card. What does it mean? When was it established? What was the circumstances that led to the foundation of this establishment, and for what purpose, Nicola? The name is very attractive, actually.
It's a beautiful name. It was actually a young person who came up with the name. Well, the campaign actually started 20 years ago when our CEO and founder, Jed Grebbie, was at a football match, and he had a look around and noticed such intense racism exhibited towards football players, ethnic minority communities, and he said, well, you know, we need to do something about this. And he wrote letters to different footballers, and one footballer in particular, Shaka Hislop, wrote back to him and said he'd love to help make a difference, and sent £50 in the post, and that's how the charity started. And Shaka's own story was he was actually filling up petrol at a petrol station. He was actually the Newcastle goalkeeper at the time, Newcastle Football Club. And these young children were shouting racial abuse at him, terrible things. And as he turned around, they realized he was the Newcastle goalkeeper. And then they walk over to him and ask him for his autograph.
This extreme change from, you know, racial remarks and then to an autograph. So you have decided through this story and many other stories that there has to be something done in this sense.
Across not only just football in Scotland, but society in general, we've actually seen an increase in racism over the last year, especially anti-Muslim rhetoric. within the country. I read an article recently where it's actually doubled over the last year. And following the referendum, we've seen such a spike in racism in the streets of Glasgow, where we have the far right actually rearing its head and trying to spread hate. Yeah.
Now, Nicola, how do you intend or planned or have the plans, for example, or plan to achieve a kind of hold for racism? Maybe it's too difficult, but what are your plans in this context? What do you do? What activities do you pursue?
Well, we just have to keep campaigning. Next week's our fortnight of action. So we have professional football clubs, professional footballers, as well as members of Scottish Parliament standing up and sending out a clear message of anti-racism throughout the country. So it's a matter of having visible leadership and those role models saying, you know, this is right, this is wrong, and racism does not belong in Scotland. We also have an annual creative competition where over 4,000 young people find ways to creatively tackle racism through art and poetry and drama and over a number of platforms. And then our main way of trying to address racism and reduce prejudice is going into schools and educating young people.
We will talk in the second part of our interview today about the education activities that you have pursued. But tell me more about the methods, Nicola.
We speak to everybody, especially now that it's increased. I think it's so important to have ethnic minority communities come through and actually tell their stories and advise our education programs. Our education worker, Gillian, has actually been really hard at work going into different communities and delivering what we already have to those communities and then getting input. And individuals help us create the education work, so it's getting those messages across. And we've actually just started a program where it's young person led. So they're actually creating their own prejudice reduction education. Right. Because we find that peer-to-peer engagement inspires change.
Why do you focus, Nicola, on football more than any other sport, for example?
Well,
even the name, show racism, the red card, you know, usually this is used, showing the red card in the football matches.
Well, football is such a big part of Scottish culture.
It's
English
a culture
as well.
Any culture, worldwide, in the four directions.
Well, if you look at the Scottish Social Attitude Survey, over 60% of the population supports football. So to have those role models come out with us and deliver those messages and help us create that education, it makes such a huge difference to our education work. You know, it's a matter of having the in-group. You know, when you see your in-group do something, you're more likely to do it.
Right.
So with these footballers, and we work with such phenomenal footballers who really believe in the message, and they're so passionate about, you know, reducing prejudice, that it really helps us sell the message to young people even more. They buy into it more.
Now, Show Racism, the Red Card is celebrating this year its 20th anniversary. Tell me about this course, the 20 years of Show Racism, the Red Card. How did it progress and develop? I would appreciate some background information since its onset back in 1996 up till now, 2016.
Well, initially it was just footballers coming along and talking to young people, and would produce films with high-profile players and getting the messages out to young people. And then we realized we actually needed to start developing that work based more on education paradigms and in line with actual prejudice reduction techniques. So we actually developed and we based it a lot more on science now and what works to reduce prejudice in terms of social psychology. But what's most wonderful is the footballers, our education team, were all on board along with young people and the community, so we really take a collaborative approach. So at first it was just footballers going along, and then we realized, you know, the power of collaborating and working with different communities. And
and then you brought in some artists, and yes, this would just help the people engage more. Yes, because to see your role model, you know, advocating a certain idea, you want also to advocate this idea and apply it.
And have it across multiple platforms.
Right. In one of the events, Nicola, you You said that in 2015, nearly 90,000 unaccompanied children sought refuge in Europe, while 3% sought safety in Britain. The UK government promised to welcome 3,000 young people who have been displaced by harrowing conflict and unspeakable human rights abuses. This promise was not met. Show Racism, the Red Card sees the UN General Assembly Summit of Refugees and Migrants as a moment that will define our humanity, and we call on leaders to show commitment and provide a workable solution to this humanitarian crisis.
We actually held an event in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago where we placed shoes down, 100 different pairs of shoes, to highlight the fact that the government said they'd take 3,000 young displaced people, and that they didn't. They haven't even reached that target at all. In Scotland, they've just recently taken their 1,000th displaced person, but it's not at all what they promised. But then if you look at what's happening with post-referendum racism and how Scottish nationals, British nationals think that people are here coming to steal their jobs and their housing, and you know, people are angry, but they don't realise they're angry at the austerity measures. And you know, they're blaming refugees, and the government is just, I don't know what they're doing.
What activities have you done in this sense concerning the dossier of refugees, for example, the people who were displaced from their countries?
Well, what we've started doing is creating refugee inclusion education. So we go into Scottish communities, the 16 local authorities that have taken in displaced families, and we've started educating those communities, but prior to the refugees arriving, because we didn't want to see, especially in more rural parts of Scotland, we didn't want to see refugees coming in and then them facing, I mean, after everything they've gone through, for them to get here and feel as if, you know, they're a burden and they're getting racially abused.
Right.
I mean, that's not what you want. So it's a matter of educating communities so that we can increase inclusiveness and cohesion. Yeah.
Right, Nicola Hay, campaign manager for Show Racism, the Red Card. Many thanks indeed for joining us, and we will be joined with your colleague Gillian after the break to talk more about the educational facet of Show Racism, the Red Card, but after the break. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا. جيلين يونسن الخبيرة التربوية في منظمة إرفعوا البطاقة الحمراء بوجه العنصرية تشرح بالتفصيل الوجه التعليمي للحملة وما المصادر التي يعتمدون عليها في هذا المنحى.
Well, we have different aspects that we educate under. So some of our work involves us going and holding workshops in schools. So that could be across the country. We might visit a school for a full day, or we might go to do repeat visits with them as well. Other aspects that children can engage with are with competitions. So each year we have an annual competition, which is an artistic or creative competition. So people can express their views in any way, but all along with our same message. And we also have events, full day events, where schools can come to us for the day, and that usually takes place at a football ground, so their local football ground, and we make a really big day of it where they'll go through different workshops, but they also get to meet players from that local club where they can put their questions about racism and their questions about discrimination to them as well. And then on top of that, we do have educational resources, so education packs that we can provide to schools or that we leave behind after the workshops, so that teachers can continue with the work and continue to look at those messages.
So you target not only the students but also the teachers.
Yeah, that's right. And
what do you do for the teachers in this sense?
Well, the educational packs are their first sort of resource. There's great activities in there that they can just look at, they can pick out, and quite often they can use them alongside the work that they're doing in classrooms already. But we also do run teacher training CPD sessions, so that's extra training for them to look at how to really respond to and how to recognise and deal with incidents of racism appropriately. And it's something that we found that a lot of teachers feel that they're lacking and they're not getting enough training in those different things. So we're really helping a lot with teacher training as well.
Tell us about the content of some of the DVDs that you rely on, which is part of this package. You have the main English language DVD and A Safe Place and Out of Sight.
That's right.
Please.
We've got some great DVDs, so a lot of those will feature interviews with the people who are affected by those. They look at defining what racism is. They also look at how to respond and how to challenge that in a safe way. And quite often the DVDs, again, they will feature ex-professional or current professional footballers, so that a lot of children, again, will see their role models giving out those messages. They've got some great footage in there as well, which help to create empathy with certain situations. Again, real life situations and people talking about their experiences. And quite often they will be young people as well, so predominantly we engage with young people. It's really great for them to see that on an open platform.
And how can you gauge here that they are very interactive with the idea of uprooting and driving away racism from their minds, from their hearts, from their behavior?
Yeah, how do we gauge it in the workshops?
Not at the workshops, perhaps later on, for example.
Okay. So I suppose it is a whole process, because prior to us going out, we will send them the DVD to watch, we'll send them some activities to do. During the workshops, again, it's a very interactive workshop where we're continually recording data, or we might be collecting in pieces of evidence from them. But we always send out evaluations afterwards as well. So that's for children to record their thoughts, where we might compare how they felt before the workshop, we might compare how they felt after the workshop, and we record any changes in attitudes and behaviours also. And something we've introduced for the last year or so is we've been conducting focus groups with those young people as well, so going out and revisiting the young people that have taken part in the workshops, and again just collecting information in terms of what they remember or how they felt or what really stuck with them, and again if they've maybe changed any of their behaviour since taking part in the workshop. Those are really, really key things for us.
Those are very important actually, but how do you go about the matter? Is it in an explicit way or is it in an implicit way? The approach, I mean, with the youngsters. For example, do you ask them, what do you know about racism? How do you define racism? This is racist, this is not racist. How do you go about this issue? This is very interesting. Because education, is the most powerful tool, as Nelson Mandela said, to change everything.
So again, it is a mixture. We have started to employ a few different techniques. Like, for example, we'll always start off in a workshop exploring stereotypes. So we have some really fun activities for children to look at, which are encouraged to draw out prejudices, but in a very, very subtle manner. So we always create like a really big emphasis on it being a safe space overall, so that children can feel comfortable being honest and sharing their real views as well. The activities might encourage them to sort of fall into their own traps of where they might be aware of stereotypes. They might use them day to day, but as the activity progresses, you begin to reveal more and more about, for example, a particular character with a person within the activity, and they begin to realise that that person might actually be closer to their own identity, or they might be surprising answers, where previously they thought that one character would be African, would be living a completely different life from them, but as you reveal different aspects of their character, they realise that actually they are just the same as anyone else in that room, or they might actually be living next door to them. So we use activities like that just to expose how simple it can be and how easy it can be to judge others wrongly or badly, and then we look at how that can then develop into more serious or more hate-filled actions when we look at what racism is made up of as well. Whereas again, people might not understand the full breadth of racism and everything that could come under that, so they might not know exactly how to define what is a racist incident. They might not understand that racism has got more than one faction to it. So certainly a lack of knowledge, and quite often there can be barriers where people maybe find some language, for example, to be acceptable, or they might think that a word is okay to use because they're not using it in a vicious sense. But then when you learn and when you understand maybe the historical use of certain words, again, that's the realization that a lot of people get when they think, okay, well, maybe we should be encouraging that in our young people as well. So I would definitely say a lack of knowledge and understanding is what's there, but we haven't come across any real problems in terms of the message.
Right. Show Racism, the Red Card team conducted a large survey with teachers across Wales. Can you please tell us about the major findings from consultations also with young people?
Ah, okay. The research that was done in Wales, I don't know if I could go into as much detail, to be honest, just now, because it's done in a very different office.
Yes.
But a lot of what we do is for our workshops, both before and after, we send out evaluations.
Right.
So, for example, before the workshop, we would ask questions such as, do you know what racism is? Can you give an example of this? Have you ever experienced it?
Have you witnessed? Have you experienced? Have you witnessed?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then similarly, after the workshop, we will ask some of those questions which are the same, and we might have another question which allows them to describe what they've learned. And that does allow us to obviously see changes in learning there, but to collect information about how it has affected people. So for the Welsh survey, for example, they will have collected information about real stories about people who have been affected by it and the numbers of those within their sample as well. So it's something which isn't often being done in other places. You know, I suppose we're in quite a good position to be able to collect some of that information and feed that back to councils as well.
That's very important. From the information that you got, Gillian, from working here in Glasgow, to what extent is racism there at your schools?
Yeah, in every single classroom.
Do you have numbers, for example, or you'd rather not talk about the numbers, but the outcome, for example?
I think I'd be more comfortable talking about the outcome and more just my sort of day-to-day experience. In every classroom, there will be examples of racism, whether that's been things that have been seen on the bus or in the street or in school, in the playground. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. We've obviously had more serious or extreme examples, or we've been asked specifically to go to a school because they've got so many issues there and they need help for it. An example I could give you would be in the northeast of Scotland. We were asked to go to a place called Fraserburgh, where the teacher had asked us there because they'd had so many problems within the playground of just name calling, different attitudes, exclusion. You know, it was rippling through the children. But what they also found is they were hearing some of this at the school gates, and that could be from children to other parents, or maybe even some parents retorting and shouting back. So sometimes, you know, we do have a lot of people who really need a lot of help, and there don't seem to be so many agencies out there that are available to help them. But on our day-to-day basis, you know, every classroom I go into, there's an activity that I'll do that I'll ask children to write down any examples that they might have seen or heard, and it's completely anonymous. Again, they can feel safe in doing that, but we always have a collection at the end of every one, some low level and some more serious as well.
Yes, allow me to close down the interview with certain kind of quotes. Racism is something created, and anything that has been created can be undone. And black or white, we all have football under our skin. And also the Nelson Mandela's famous saying, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I hope that many countries and cabinet secretaries in various countries, secretaries of education actually can and would adopt your methods, your techniques, your approach toward making the society free of racism, because, you know, racism starts, as you said, as an educator. It starts from our school, so we have in the Ministry of Education to try and help the parents through their children to stop being racist, to stop having this mindset. Gillian Yunson, education worker at Show Racism, the Red Card. Many thanks indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You're always welcome. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@الميادين.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل. من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من غلاسكو اسكتلندا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.